Hello and welcome to this month's Stories That Made Alliance. I'm Kyle Schwarz, and today we're at the historic Haines House with Dalton Rininger Kline. And we've never had Dalton on our program, so we're going to get to know him a little bit first, and then we'll get to know more about the house. So welcome.
Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate it. Thanks for being here.
Sure. So Dalton, how did you get involved in the Preservation Society?
So my story's a little atypical because we moved to Alliance right before the pandemic. And I remember sending out cold calls and emails during the pandemic. And I sent them to the city, the Historical Society, and the Preservation Society. And the Preservation Society was the one place that got back to me.
Okay.
And so they recruited me very quickly. And so I've been on the board or involved since about 2021.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that was still a tough time,
Yes.
still during the pandemic.
Yeah.
All right. So is it because you just have always had an interest in history? Tell us about your background.
Yeah, I really find physical places, a representation of history, a really great way to connect with the past, right? So a lot of times after the tours here, I'll ask our younger visitors, would you rather read about this in a book or would you rather be here? And of course, it's always be here. Books are good, but and I've always lived my life that way too, and that really is what drove me in my profession because I'm a professional preservationist with my degree in that, and I've always been doing this for my whole adult life.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do? You went to Kent State and you continued to work there. So tell us
Yes,
about that.
I do. I went to Kent State and got my degree with preservation, and then now I also teach at Kent State some history and preservation and design courses. I do that as an adjunct faculty. I'm also very involved in the community, so I like to have a nice balance of stuff.
It sounds like you do a lot.
Everyone does.
All right. So tell us about some of the main interesting points of the Haines House. It is the oldest brick home still in use in Alliance?
Yes. So we really like to tell a three-part story with Haines House. And not only are we associated with the Underground Railroad, but we're also associated with, big advocates in the area throughout the timeline of history, and also homesteading for just this region of Ohio. As you might know, we're just south of what was the Western Reserve at one point in time. And this area specifically, the Haynes were the Grants, who initially came here, were some of the first families that homesteaded this area. The room that we're standing in now was the Grants' home that they constructed on this land. We actually have an image here showing their log cabin that used to be located by the Salvation Army.
Oh, wow.
So when they first came to this area, they built a log cabin and then constructed this home and moved in here. This was the upgrade. So we really like to tell the story that this was a young family of Quakers that moved this way to grow their family and find wealth and prosperity. They were farmers. This was all farmland.
Okay. So also, everybody talks about the connection to the Underground Railroad. How did that come about here?
So the family, as I had mentioned, they had strong ties with their Quaker religion, and that drove a lot of their decisions to become a part of the movement, how God viewed man, and equality within all people. So the Grants, who originally moved to this land and built this home, they were Quakers. And they believed in the same things that the Quakers were known with more prominently in Salem, being known the Quaker town. And that's what really got them involved with these beliefs. Now, we are standing in the Haines House, and that's because the Grants' youngest daughter, Sarah, married Ridgway Haynes. And then Sarah and Ridgway were the ones that became involved on the Underground Railroad.
Oh, okay. All right. So when you do a tour of this house, do you get to see the area where the slaves went?
Yes. So we typically tell the narrative about freedom seekers and about how this is a topic that spans across generations, across times, and across different types of people and their circumstances. So when we think about people that were enslaved and this this place geographically located. We really like to tell the story as Ohio being, in this area, being a hotbed of people escaping slavery. When they were on the Underground Railroad and a part of this movement, West Virginia wasn't West Virginia, it was Virginia, and that was a slave state. So we're talking about, a 45-mile distance between here and what was a slave state then. So this really was an important area, and that becomes part of the narrative of the Haynes, in that they talk about looking outside and helping people, seeing them cross from the west side of Alliance, or from the east side, and then come this way. They were sitting out at night. Ridgway would be outside with his gun with him in case any trouble was coming their way. And then once they got to the house, they had a room up right above where we're standing now. So we're in the original 1827 portion of the home, and above us is a loft. So currently you can't tell that there's a loft above us because it would have just been a little ladder that would have just gone upstairs. But that is where above us is where they would have hid out on their journey to freedom. And a lot of these people that were escaping slavery, they'd had a long journey. Their goal was to go to Canada. So they would go from here to Randolph or Marlborough, then to Kent, Ravenna, Hudson, all the way up to Lake Erie and cross the lake. Another thing that's really significant about this home is that when we think about the stories of these people escaping slavery, a lot of these people didn't have the privilege to read or write. So when we think about history being documented very well, the voices of these people were never captured. So we only have these physical places where these people occupied the space. So I really like that we have an actual physical space that people can connect with these stories of these people, because they weren't written down very commonly. And that's, I think, a really special moment when you come to visit the Haines House.
Right, okay. So how did it come to be gifted, or however, I don't know how you would say that, to the Preservation Society?
Yes, that is a journey that I'm a little not as familiar with, but I can hopefully give the Cliff Notes version. So the Preservation Society acquired the house in 2001. After Sarah and Ridgway Haynes died in the early 1900s, it became apartments by the 1920s. And then by the 1960s, it was owned by a local preservationist named Eric Johannesson, who was also a Mount professor. And he helped start the preservation movement in Ohio with multiple societies and the state society. And he owned this home and restored it. And then after his time here, it went into private hands. And from that point, people knew about the Haines House and how important this building was because of Eric Johannesson's work, but its future wasn't very secure. So that's when some community advocates got together. Our current president, Rob Hyde, was also involved with this at that moment in time. And we're really, we wouldn't have the Haines House without just those community members coming together and being like, what's going to happen to this home and its future? And the nonprofit was formed and the house was purchased.
So much work in any home, but especially one of this age. And so I know that you guys have a lot of volunteers. How many volunteers do you think? Oh goodness! Just so guesstimate.
I would say regularly around maybe the 30 to 40 range. A lot of our volunteer base is done through docents and people involved with educational activities associated to Haines House. But of course we have a board and people that maintain and do the groundskeeping and stuff. It's coming on that time in spring. So I would say we have quite a bit. A lot of them are involved with the education aspect though.
Okay. Are you always looking for more volunteers?
We are. It's fun here. So I often hear from our board and from people, why can't we get more young people? And I would just like to say that, people are out there. It really has nothing to do with age. If you're interested in this stuff, join. I don't care what your age is, young or old. I think people that have a passion for that connection and want to be in this place, those are the people that, should be joining us and should be docents or joining different works
even
around the
come
home.
once or twice to help with the spring and the fall
Yes.
cleanup outside.
Yep.
If you like yard work, there's always
There is always something to do around here. We have a lot of projects going on, a lot of construction projects, big things. Hopefully the house will look in tip-top shape in a couple years too. So.
All right, so there's talk about how some changes are coming about with the different historical groups and alliance. But for now, if somebody wants to do a tour here, specifically the Haines House, how do they do that?
So we have been under a procedure of open weekends for many years now, and those will start in the spring and go all the way to the fall. We close down open weekends for tours in the winter, but you can do tours by request. Our past weekend that we just had, the beginning of March, was our first open weekend commencing the 2024 season. Now with these open weekends, they happen the first Saturday and Sunday of every month, and you can just walk into the site. Not only Haines House is doing that, but also Maybelle Hartzell and the Castle Crusaders at Glamorgan Castle.
And what are the hours for that?
So on Saturdays, we are 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., and on Sundays, we're 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. So we've tried to give a nice chunk of time so that people have the opportunity to visit multiple sites during that span of being open.
Okay. All right. Well, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we close the program?
So many things.
I know. But we don't want to give away too much.
Yes,
we want people to come and feel this and witness this in person.
Yeah. That would be the biggest takeaway, I think. You can come here at least 6 times throughout the year and get a different tour every time, see something new. We have a membership, so you don't just have to come in and do the donation tour. You can become a member of the Preservation Society.
And come as often as you want.
And come as often as you want. There's always different people here. You learn different things. We have a lot of cool kids stuff, so bring your kids because they can always go outside and play with some of the games too. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Dalton. It was nice to have you on the show, and you seem to have a real passion, and it comes through.
I try not to get too excited.
Well, you did great.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Stories That Made Alliance at the Haines House.
Thank you for watching Stories That Made Alliance, a monthly production featuring historic places and events in the Carnation City.